Welcome to the Grief Cocoon podcast, where you'll hear open, honest, and thoughtful conversations on grief and loss, death, and life. In this episode, I speak to Gloria Eade, a poet, writer, leadership coach, and grief movement guide. I've personally worked with Gloria when I've been going through transitions and when I've been super stuck, and she's really a master of guiding people to listen to their intuition and to gently, move through transitions in the best way they can. We speak about how to listen to your intuition, how to develop presence with the uncomfortable that grief can bring, and even how to deal with loss of identity and just generally transitions, because grief is a kind of life transition. So I really hope you can take all the wisdom and insights from this episode and start applying them in your own life. So Gloria, would you be able to tell me a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I'm a personal leadership coach to artists, to entrepreneurs, executives, new managers, and really anyone who is in a life or career transition of some kind. I help people access their inner power, their spirit, their creativity, their energy, so that they can really work and live inspired and feel more connected to themselves and to others, and ultimately to feel more free. And for as long as I could remember, I've always been a very curious person, like the one on the playground that just wanted to ask all the other kids questions and learn how they lived their lives and what they ate for dinner and what they talked about with their families. And but I was also not the kid who knew exactly what she was going to be when she grew up. And I hadn't known that. So it's not surprising that I entered into something that has no clear linear journey to get to. Coaching is really an opportunity to be alongside another person in their experience of life and meet them where they're at, meet them in the questions that they're living in at this particular moment in time. And how I got here, I mean, it's a winding road. Maybe it can come up in the conversation today, but really all of my work, even before coaching, had been in the realm of human development of some kind, whether it was when I was far younger, like still in high school, deciding that I was going to become a lawyer when I grew up, when I finally had something to latch onto, to then moving into social work, to then moving into higher education and working with students, to doing international development work. It's kind of all led me to really just having the kinds of experiences and space to self-reflect, and then to be practiced in some tools and concepts and philosophies to then share with others.
Yeah. And I know that as part of your journey, you kind of took a year sabbatical, right? Like you sort of quit your job and just went on this sort of self-discovery journey. And I was interested in, I guess, how grief came into that. And because a lot of us also kind of, our identity can be tied up with our job role and our job function and what we do and our career. And so it can be a bit scary to sort of let go of that and do something like what you did. And so did you sense a particular kind of grief or loss that came with taking the leap to end up doing what you're doing?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that was quite early in my career after university. But given that I was a kid who never really knew what she wanted to do when she grew up, she was also extremely fixated on finding out. So for a really long time, and from a very young age, I felt like it was necessary for me to figure out what I would do for work, because whether it was explicit or implicit, there was like this knowing inside of me. I had a sense that work was important for me to survive, and I really wanted to survive. I really wanted to live. And so I really, really, really wanted to work. And I, my life was very focused on that. Everything that I had done was to develop myself to be someone who could receive opportunities, who can gain more work experience. I wanted to work as early as I could. And it was like 11 years old when I first started getting paid for my newspaper route. And I just deliver newspapers at 11 years old and started making something like $20 a month or less in that process. And so by the time I was maybe even 3 years into my career, I started feeling like, oh, this is not it. And this can't be all there is. And it was a very disorienting time, because at that point, I had already entered into leadership roles. I had some amazing experience under my belt. I was leaving what was, and I would say still is, one of the most defining work experiences and roles that I've had. It was very life-affirming work. I've been grateful that I've always really found myself in work that has been really aligned to me. And so that added a little bit more confusion to it all too, because it's really maybe understandable to hear a story of someone who is super misaligned and hates their job and is stressed out and burnt out and has health crisis, and then doesn't decide, but gets pushed into a new way of life. Whereas in my case, I didn't really get pushed. I got pulled into something from some deep listening, but it was also confusing still at the time. Like now, over the years, I can track when certain sensations or thoughts or feelings come up for me that indicate that maybe I am on a verge of change that I need to accept and allow. But back then there was a lot of resistance to it, and a lot of, but if it's not this, then what? And I really wanted to figure out what the what was. I had some ideas, but what I felt that I needed to do more than anything was to step back from all of it. Literally to just sign out of the life that I had landed into and say, okay, reset. Let's try again. Let's see what's here now for me from what I know. And we'll get into maybe what those ideas were, but to go back to your question around the kind of grief that came up, absolutely. And I would say that the biggest part that I needed to grieve was, one, not being attached to anything work related for a bit, because that was the choice that I ended up making. So being in the grief of, who am I without my work? That's very disorienting in terms of identity. And then the second piece to the grief was letting go of the relationships that were very precious to me, that I really appreciated, that meant so much and that gave me so much, and that I got to spend time building. And people are such an important part of my life, and I really value relationships and teamwork and creating things alongside other people and collaborating. And that was so much of my work that I was letting go of. And I was so sad at the thought of no longer having the kind of intimacy with these people anymore, because although I couldn't know for sure, when we make a decision and we make a choice to change, the dynamic of all of the relationships around us inevitably changes. And I had known that that was going to be the case, didn't quite know how it would turn out, but just that I needed to sort of be with for some period of time before I actually decided, okay, I'm willing to have relationships drop. I'm willing to have less connection with these people in my life. I'm willing, like I just had to get to the point of willingness for me to be okay with that.
It sounds like you already did your own kind of processing of some of it's sort of like anticipated losses that you're going to face.
Correct. And it took me a year before my decision, like before I knew, okay, I'm no longer going to be in this role. I don't need to make a rash decision here. I don't need it to be quick. I can set myself up to be supported through this, but I still have my eye on the prize. And I just set a deadline for myself. And so I had this period of time, like you said, where you're seeing everything in the eyes of it might be the last, So there's a sense of deep gratitude that I was able to feel in those months leading up to my end date. And also because I had set that deadline and I was anticipating leaving the work that I knew and the life that I knew, I also created support systems for myself. Like I was able to put in place things that would make my time there as easy, not as easy, but as supported and as easeful as possible. The work was really demanding, and it did take a lot of hours in my day and week and months over time. And we worked off of like project cycles. So there was really no wrap up and no low time, really, especially in the world of student development and higher education. Like student life doesn't go to sleep when they sleep. There's still work always to be done and like to get prepared for. So I was recognizing like, okay, I've been in this for a couple years now. I can come to expect what is it that I need when we're at the peak periods and the high moments. Where do I got to set my boundaries? What is not that important right now for me? What can I prioritize? What should I prioritize? And then it really did make the transition process for me, personally, I think as best as it could be.
Yeah, and you mentioned support systems. I just was wondering, what did that look like in terms of, what did you put in place?
So firstly, really pragmatically, I had, and this is back before there was such a food delivery system available so easily for us in the world. But I had said, okay, when I am in these peak months, I know that I don't eat well. I have no time to cook. Food is important to me. It makes me better for my team when I'm nourished and fed. So I found a local company. It was just like a mom and pop company that created already cooked meals at the back of a health food store. And this was like back 2015 or something like that. And I said to myself, okay, that is what I'm going to sign up for. Please deliver meals to my house in a little cooler bag 5 days a week or however long it was, so that I could be fed during this time. It was like for a few months. And then I had people come, I had cleaning service for my house. I signed up for, that was the first year where I had, my employer had a meditation course or program, I guess, for the staff at the school, and signed up for that. And I went through like a 8-week course of just, okay, give something to myself here. This is something that I want to develop. I know I'm curious about this. What the hell is it? Let me learn. And so I just gave myself that opportunity. So being by the ocean, trying to walk as much as possible, bike when I can to work. I was lucky to be close enough to commute. And there was probably more. Oh, connecting with my mentors as well as I was going through that change. There were people that were wiser than me and older than me and had perspective that I really wanted. And so creating those engagements with people during that time was also really supportive.
Wow. It just, I know this is not where I was planning to go, but it just sort of occurred to me that, those sorts of practical things are so helpful as well when you lose a loved one, like and you were going through I guess what do you call it, like a transition in terms of your, I guess, your work life and your identity as well.
Your whole identity.
Yeah, but even the things that you were talking about are important after other kinds of losses as well. And I actually, I'm going to jump to because I know that you've also experienced the loss of a loved one, and I was just wondering whether your experience of that time before you left your job, whether that also transferred to the time when you lost a loved one, or what I know that was your dad unwell before?
Yes. No, I love what you're bringing forward, and that's so great that you noticed that so much of what I was putting in place, not recognizing that I was in a grief or that I was really in loss, but just knowing how can I preserve as much as I can of me during this time that I know is really hard, and kind of using the wisdom of my past experiences in the role to support that period. So yes, several years after that, about 4 years after that, I had lost my dad to pancreatic cancer. And that was kind of abrupt. I mean, that's also subjective too, but it was about 6 months from prognosis to his death. And before that, for all we all knew, he was perfectly well. And then suddenly was not. And so that really changed the makeup of our family. And I was also living across the country. Ever since I had finished school, I had moved to Vancouver to be there afterwards for work, and just had always been traveling in and out of Vancouver to Toronto. And so at that time, not only was the whole family sort of trying to navigate this news and support, but I was also long distance to my family, and in some effects, a long distance caregiver. The way that support looked like during my grief after the loss of my dad, well, not even after, I would say there's still the anticipatory grief that was experienced. And at that time, it was a lot of nature. It was a lot of being outdoors. It was writing and processing, speaking with others who had similar experiences with parent loss or parents going through cancer. And that was helpful. On the other side, it looked way more like receiving support from others on the pragmatics, because I wasn't capable. So having the friends come in and do my dishes and, end up coming into my home with my keys before I even arrived back to Vancouver, and having cleaned up the place, just made sure that things were tidy and fresh because I had been gone back home for quite a while after my dad's death. Phone calls, writing workshops, being in community with others, lots of walking still, listening to podcasts on grief and loss, moving, dancing, even if it was just my feet in the air sometimes, because that's all that I could do. So yes, the knowledge and the insights and the experience that I had in past losses and transitions did support me through what I would say is the ultimate kind of transition, the ultimate kind of loss and death, is that of a loved one. It did really support, I think. It still is never like you're not immune. Doesn't matter how much work you've done, doesn't matter how much experience you've had, doesn't matter how much you've studied it theoretically. There's something that happens after death, experiencing the death of a loved one, that actually needs to like metabolize in the body. This, like, your cells actually need to feel it to know that the person is not here anymore, to know that your life and that your body is going to move through the world differently now. And so that was really illuminating for me to get to the place where, yes, it's all supportive and nothing is a waste, and still it doesn't make it easy. And I'm not immune to the pain or the hurt or the grief or the loss or the waves of grief, especially in those acute months.
And did it impact, because you hold space for other people in your work, and there might be others who also like facilitate groups or do even social work and different things like that, where you're working with people and you're listening to people. How did the grief, that after your dad died, like how did you kind of manage your own grief alongside having, well, or did you take a break, or did you kind of continue?
Yes. So I love that you brought that up too, because that experience created another transition point in my life, and another invitation to, actually what it did is it invited me to step more fully into my life. So I was at the time working, although I was coaching part-time, I was still working in a university in a new role after that time of pause. And it was way more aligned work. It gave me the flexibility that I was dreaming of. It gave me the autonomy that I was needing. It gave me the space to create. It gave me opportunity to travel. It helped. It was a role that was more focused on career advising with students. So I loved everything that I had entered into after that time of pause. It was good for me. And yet it was still work on the periphery of what I felt really called to do. And when my dad passed, it was another moment of like, okay, here we are again. These things have been calling at you. If it's not now, when is it going to be? And people say in grief, like, don't do anything drastic, don't quit your job, don't travel the world, like in the first year or whatever, 6 months. I don't care for any of that. I trust myself enough to know that, especially if something has been consistent with me, And that hasn't actually gone away over time, that it's not going to. It's gonna just whisper back at me whenever there's space for me to hear it. So what that period was for me was an invitation to write, actually, to step away. So I left my job right when I was given permanent work for it. And I had given like a few months notice, and the intention for this pause or transition was to create space for more coaching clients and move full time into coaching work, while also begin writing my book. And that was the year of 2020, and it was a memoir on discovering who we are beyond our work. And it was a memoir on self-trust. And it was me illustrating that through my time of career transition and letting go of my work and my life and my working identity, to explore the question, who am I without my work? So I spent a couple years in writing, and it's been put to rest for this period of time. I'm sure it's going to circle back at some point. But what I've come to realize is that I need to live into the next few chapters of that book. I still need some life experience to write about, to really feel like the book can be closed and that it's finished. But so far, I've written everything that I can that can tell the story. And that was really what that invitation was, like the second time when my dad passed. It was, yes, I'm entering another unknown. I'm entering a portal. I'm entering some darkness. And I know what's important here is to tend to it, to really just give myself as much space to feel it all as much as I can. And what I learned also during those first few months in that acute time of grief is it can be very scary. Like, to feel can be so scary. And there were moments where I was like actually afraid of my emotions and how overwhelming they could be. But what I've come to see, and now it's 4 years after the death of my dad, is that you always come back up for air. Like, there's the waves, they change shape over time. And a beautiful line that I had come across in those early months said something like, for a while, you live inside of grief until eventually the grief lives inside of you. And so I'm really there now, and I can feel that, and I know that to be true, where there's a part of me now where the grief lives, and it's like a new space that has been created. And that everything that is coming from my life now inevitably tracks back to that moment, and inevitably tracks back to that life experience. It has to, like, it's all connected if I choose to see it that way. And so just really recognizing this cycle of like death and birth and death and birth that is happening in our current lives, in our human experience. We go through a series of that over time until the ultimate death, where the body dies. So that's actually a lot of the work that I love to be in. Just going back to what you were saying around supporting clients, it makes my job, or the work that I do, in a sense, more fulfilling, because it has opened up a kind of empathy and understanding that I did not have before. And I see everybody with a kind of strength and power, because I know how hard it can be and to be able to come to a session, come to a call, and no matter what the grief is, no matter what the loss or the transition is, it's like, ugh, I admire you. Like, you are so strong. Like, that's the belief that I hold in my head for everyone that I connect with.
I'm hearing, that you do have a lot of self-trust, and I guess, not everyone does trust themselves and trust that they will be able to deal with all the emotions that come up and to deal with the overwhelm. And yeah, but I guess what would you say to people that might not trust that they will definitely make it through the overwhelm? Or
Yeah. It's such a soft and tender place to be there, to really not be able to see the way through or what's on the other side or when it will end. And I remember that vividly. Like, as you speak that, it's like I have the image of myself there at some point too. And I guess the most significant thing to practice, or that I've learned supports in that practice, is presence. Which means that in that moment of overwhelm, if you're present to it, you'll feel it. It'll feel really hard. And in that same way, if you are present to every other moment in your life, you will also recognize, you'll be able to see and acknowledge when that's not there. You'll be able to see and acknowledge, oh, wow, this is an exciting moment for me. Or I just had a laughing fit with my friend right now. That is amazing and hilarious. And wow, I can't believe that just happened after yesterday being like on the bathroom floor curled up. How wild. And that is actually a lot of the dialogue, the inner dialogue or monologue, or that had happened for me, and that still happens for me, is really being present to everything, so that I'm not discrediting the times where the joy is there, the joy is felt, where the space, where I can feel more space to breathe, where I can feel more lightness. And it doesn't have to, I don't try to latch onto it and to try to preserve it and to try to use it as a way to avoid the pain. It's just noticing, wow, all of this exists. And that's what makes it okay for me.
Is that something that you've had to practice, like being present, more present in your life to different moments? Because I think that's also something people struggle with sometimes, like just being present and not, foggy in their head and just thinking about all these things that that are coming up, the things that they have to deal with, or anxieties, like what was it that, how did you become more present in your day-to-day life?
Well, it's one and the same, I think, trust and presence. So when you say people also don't really know much about how to be present, it's part and parcel. It's like one and the same. The absence of presence is like the distraction, right? It's because I don't trust, or I worry about, or I fear this, or it's not in the now. It's not in the experience of right now. And it takes you out of the present moment. And so, yes, absolutely, it's a practice of, what am I grateful for? Like, gratitude is a huge tool, and it doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be anything that you don't yet have. It's just finding what is already here for you that you can be grateful for, and grounding yourself in that, and seeing, okay, like what can I touch that feels wonderful for me, feels comfort, feels safe. That's a form of presence. Tapping into your breath, like literally just taking 3 deep breaths is huge. It can change and I do this sometimes in sessions, starting off the call with a person, and it takes no more than 3 to 5 minutes, and it shifts so much. And we it's so quick for us to override that or to not see that as something valuable or important, but it's so significant and it takes such little time. Being out in nature and recognizing the nature that's around me also brings me back to presence. When I think about people, like say there's a person that pops into my head, a way of my presence is not letting that thought go by, but actually taking the moment and like sending them the message. If I can't call them, it's actually like, hey, just thought of you. How are you doing? Like I take all of those things now as signs and forms of listening. So it's like something brought them in to my consciousness. And it's practicing in those little things, like in those little moments, that I think the more that we do, the larger our capacity to trust and to notice becomes. So maybe like finding the things that you realize you might skip over because there's that very quick thought of, not right now, it's too much, it's not that important. And I know we all have something like that. Even just starting with that thing and creating a different response to it, my sense is that will help train that presence.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned when you think of someone, because that happened to me just yesterday. I actually woke up, had a dream, and my friend from high school was in that dream. And then I thought, I can't remember exactly what the dream was about, but we were there and I hadn't heard from her for a while. And so I didn't text her till just before I went to bed. I thought, wait a minute, she was in my dream. I'm just gonna message her now before I go to sleep. Just to see if she's
Nice.
okay.
Yeah.
And that just sort of made me feel better, because otherwise, that probably would have gone on to the next day and the next day. And so
Totally.
yeah, just something that simple. And so I guess it's in a way listening to your intuition, because those whispers and those different things that come up in the back of your mind, like obviously they're coming from somewhere deeper than your surface level things that you're doing, and
Yes.
so I guess one question is like, how do you use your intuition in terms of like dealing with change and transitions and grief? Is listening to your intuition one way that
Yes.
has been helpful?
Yes. And how do we listen to our intuition?
Mm.
It requires our stillness. We need to be in solitude. We need to be in stillness. We need to be in quiet in order for that to come through. And we live in a world, probably by design, where it is very difficult for us to get a second to do that, unless we decide it, unless we choose to make that a priority. And I'm not saying like this means we need to sit and be in meditation for an hour. No, that's not the only way, but it is just literally taking pause. So that first career pause ended up being 10 months for me, where my plan was no plan. I said, I don't want to enter into a new job right away. I don't want to go into work right away, because what I know that I need, I don't know what's going to come of this, but what I know that I need is to have space, to do nothing, to reset, to explore, to experiment, to take care of all of my life administration that I haven't had time to prioritize and look at, to basically create and set the foundation for this vision of what I wanted to happen next, to set the foundation, to create the conditions for that to show up for me. And I just knew that if I continued in the lifestyle and the way that I was living and working at that point, nothing greater was going to come for me for my life. I wasn't going to be able to create anything greater. And so that's not something that I don't think it's not the one answer for everybody. If it's available and you feel called to it, then yes, like I think it is one of the most profound transformational things we could do. But the pause can also come in a moment in a day. And it could actually be done on a walk. It could be done through journaling, through just stream of consciousness. It can be done through prompts, conversation prompts or writing prompts. It could be done through investing in mentorship or coaching and giving yourself the time and space and container where the focus is on you and your growth and your development and who you wish to become. It's to have that partner or that guide to help you discern what are all of the sensations, what are you noticing that is an intuition, what are you noticing that is a worry or a fear. And so part of like how to develop a connection to our intuition is just slowing down enough to be able to discern what feels right and good for us in our body and what feels like not ours in the body, what feels like it came from somewhere else, what feels not true for us. And there's so many different ways to explore that, but that's what I think the core of it is.
So much wisdom in that. Do you mind if I just switch a little bit? Because I've had people over the years talk about loss of who they thought they would become. And when I think about leaving a job or changing careers or, like, I feel like part of it, or even actually, loss of a loved one can also mean, that your relationships, for example, like if someone loses a child or a spouse, suddenly their part of their identity is no longer there, or it's shifted so drastically that it's really disorienting. And so, I think it involves some letting go of dreams that you've had for your life and significant milestones. And so I guess wanted to know whether you've got any kind of insights in like how to deal with that, the loss of future selves or future dreams that people might have or might have had for themselves. Even if sometimes I guess it's just like an age thing, by this age I thought I would have achieved this.
Oh yeah.
Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I've experienced all of that. I remember feeling when my dad was dying, there was this grieving of myself and how I wanted my life to be at that point, that it wasn't. And the grieving of what is this going to mean for the next several years of my life, because this is a monumental, almost like wrench in the life plan, because we don't plan to have our parents die before we're 30, or whatever it is. Each one of us has our own moment, I think, of like, now I got to deal with this. Now I have to live through whatever this is going to mean for me now.
Mm.
And there's big emotion in that, and it is still part of our grieving process. And one of the most profound insights that I think I've gotten around this comes from Cheryl Strayed, one of my favorite writers. And she, in her book, Tiny Beautiful Things, there's a paragraph that talks about the sister lives that we have not lived. And she says something like, we'll never know about the lives that we did not choose. And it's a sister life that was beautiful and important, and it wasn't ours, and it didn't carry us. And there's nothing else for us to do but to just wave to it from our shoreline. And I really love that sentiment so much, because it brings me peace that there is, I think in one respect, it can be very overwhelming for us to be in a place where there's infinite choice. And like we can see there's so many different directions that we can go and things that we can choose. And on the other hand, that is all that we have. We actually do have infinite choice, but we just don't see it. And we don't see the beauty of all of that. We don't see the beauty that we are always choosing, and we can always be choosing. In fact, I think a lot of the resistance to making a choice for our lives and going into a direction is that we fear, because I've chosen it, if something messes up, or if I fail at it or it doesn't work out, then it's all on me. I didn't get pushed into it. There was no health crisis that made me change the course of my life. There was no big death that made everything get pulled up from under me. I just one day woke up and said, oh, I don't want to cry every day before I go to work anymore. And no one's really telling me from the outside that this isn't a good fit, but it feels not right for me. So I'm going to make this choice, and I'm going to enter into an unknown, and I'm going to let a lot of things go that have been good for me. And so much of why we don't do that, and I think why so many people don't choose their highest choice, is because of, but what if there's something else here that I can't see or that I'm missing? And so there's part of like, it's the paradox, right? I love paradoxes. There's no one answer, but it's also, there's something that's, I think, operating that's way beyond our consciousness anyway. Like whatever it is that we can imagine for ourselves is still so limited. And it's impossible for us to know all of the synchronicities that can occur once we make a decision that could lead us into what I also think is like, it doesn't also matter the choice that we make and the decision that we make, because it's going to lead us ultimately to exactly the thing that we're supposed to live and experience in our lifetime here anyway. So it's like this push and pull. I think of two truths. They feel both quite true for me. Somehow that gives me peace to know that I could just like chill. Like I don't have as much control as I think I have. And if I'm trying to control a lot, that's how I know I've lost control over my direction, over my sense, my knowing that I can choose. And then I just bring myself to, okay, what's the best way forward here? What would I like to try? What is exciting me? What energizes me? What makes me feel nervous, but in a way that feels very expansive for me, like I'd be stepping into a bigger version of myself. It's those kinds of questions that I think are useful. They're generative. they actually can move us forward versus the what if, but what if I fail? What if it doesn't work out? Will this work? You can even, the energy of those questions is so different than the earlier ones. And so that's what I offer is it almost feels a little bit futile to fixate on something that is not your current life. We can mourn it, we can grieve it, we can wonder for a period of time. I wonder about, oh, how would life at this part of my growth be with my dad? I think he would be an amazing dad for an adult child. I don't get that. I won't get that experience. And that's okay, right? Like that's just, I will have my moments of grieving that for the rest of my life. In the moments where that will come up for me. And what I am left with is still an ability to choose how I will live with this loss.
So it's kind of,
does that help? Like, does that make sense?
No, because I'm just thinking about like, yeah, it's like the response and then the actual situation, that where people feel like they had no choice, like, because, when you lose a loved one or when things happen tragically, like, it's like, whoa, like that is not what I would have chosen for my life, or that's not what I would have wanted to happen. But then, yeah, and then you're saying like, after that situation or that event, you're kind of left with, okay, now what will I do, or what will how will I choose to move forward or live after this, after this situation that or event or loss that I didn't choose,
So, yeah, what do I want to make matter now? What matters now most to me? And if we get to ask ourselves those questions, I bet that we can, despite our loss and despite the grief, we can live still very fulfilling, very present, very alive lives. I feel like the grief that I hold, and in that acute time of loss after my dad's death, it was a very strange sensation and phenomenon, but I felt the most alive. The most pain that I could have ever felt, the most sad that I've ever been. Somehow I felt the most connected and the most alive. And it's probably because I was just like present to so much and feeling so much. Not to say that there weren't times where you're just like, okay, I'm done with that. I can put that to the side now. Let me go watch a movie or just like, I don't know, do something to take my mind off of it, of course. And those are blessings. Those are literally times of blessings for us. And it's like, if grief was personified, she's almost like, I'm always here. And I come up a lot when no one's around. And that's because we're building a relationship here. You don't know me quite yet. So I'm here to have you get to know me. And that's all right. I'll give you away to your people too, because they're also important to your process and they're important to me, because through them, you get to be more connected to me sometimes too. So that's cool. And I just kind of see grief like that. All that to say is what it is that we want to make, not that we have to even make anything of it, but bringing ourselves back to what matters most and then honoring that, however that looks.
I think I totally resonate with that because, I think something so significant, is really just strips everything away that you thought mattered, and then kind of, I think it emphasizes or highlights what does matter if you really pay attention. And then you can, start to hone in on the things that really do matter and start to live your life more according to, prioritizing those things as opposed
Yeah.
to.
And for people like you and me, Gabby, it is to create, I think. I don't know if you would agree, but for me, it's like, yeah, what comes out of these experiences is a compulsion to just create and to make what's intangible. This is something that I love. And I learned this through one of my own mentors too, Joanna, around ritual, like what the point of ritual is. And she defines it as making the intangible tangible. So when we create after loss or in our grieving, it's almost like we're making tangible that which is intangible. And it is super empowering. It allows us to relate to our grief and to our emotions in a different way. And it helps us metabolize these things in our bodies. We get to use our body to express that. And so I think for a lot of people, actually, there's a response to honoring what that experience is through creativity and through creation.
Yeah, I definitely have that. And then I found that, through creating, I was able to connect more with other people, because eventually I was like, maybe I will share this poem or, like maybe I'll share this song. And then suddenly I discovered all these other people that were grieving and that had experienced loss. And I was like, oh,
yes,
I had no idea until I actually put this out in the world, and then people actually connected. So
it's the bridge to connection. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's so poignant, and I think you just need to give yourself permission to go into that and to explore that, and to give yourself permission to express your grief, because I think it can be scary and overwhelming, and for a time it might be, you might feel like it's too much, but it needs to be, I think it needs to be expressed, because otherwise it will come up in all sorts of ways that might not be healthy or might not be useful if you don't give it space.
Yeah. And so you're really bringing up for me just the reminder of going so gently on ourselves through that time too, because our world changes and that's very disruptive. So we require time to let things settle. And it's probably the greatest task during that time is to go so gently and to be so gentle with ourselves.
Yeah. People might find it harder at this time to do that, because we have so many things that can distract us and take up our time, and so many things that we can easily do instead of sitting with ourselves and sitting with grief. So I think that you've mentioned a lot in this conversation that even if you can't take a whole month or a year off or 10 months, you can start by finding pockets of or moments of space and moments of stillness. Yeah, you've given so many insights in this conversation, and I'm not quite sure how to wrap that up now, but I just want to thank you so much for all your sharing your experience and your perspective and ways of thinking about things, because it's all the uncomfortable stuff, that people don't want
I'm so
to.
grateful.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you have this space to share, because I don't think that the world has enough space to talk about endings. It's very focused on the beginnings of things and starting, but how do we possibly start without having honored whatever it is that we need to let go of? That with every start, with every beginning, there is a letting go, there is a loss, and we don't acknowledge that part. And I think that's also what has made transition so difficult for so many of us, because we don't recognize, it's not in the culture to allow and to acknowledge that before beginning anything, there's a period of putting things in their places, honoring and acknowledging what you've loved that will no longer be here. Honoring and acknowledging the changes in relationship or dynamic because of what you are moving into. And it's like holding both of those things. I'm so ready to start and to begin. And the world prides us on those beginnings. And at the same time, I love just as deeply this life that I have lived that won't be there anymore. And even if it's like, even if it was difficult stuff that you're letting go of, creating a sense of peace and acceptance with that, I think will always benefit our beginnings that comes after that.
Yeah, because you can't really, I guess, clearly move into something without when you still haven't truly acknowledged and closed the chapter before, in a way.
Yeah, and I think that closing can still happen periodically later on and onwards. Like, it's not just tying everything up in a bow and then that's that, but it's really just like, again, we're just to go back to presence. It's like, that's another example of presence to your life. It's like not needing to rush, but just giving everything its right space. And then when you're done, you're done.
Thanks, Laura. Is there anything that we that you wanted to add that you haven't mentioned so far, or that you haven't talked about?
No, I think that this was a really powerful, reflective conversation. So thank you for all your questions and the conversation. It's fun. It was fun to talk about.
Actually, I forgot. If someone wanted to find out more about you and your work, where could they find you?
My website, gloriaeid.com. Everything's there. You can also find me on Instagram, GLO_EID, LinkedIn. Those are pretty much the places where I hang out. But on my website, you can subscribe to my list and receive actually an audio story around moving from a dream life, a perceived dream life, into real life. And it's a bit of a mini memoir that I put together through audio. And it tells a little bit more of that first transition around my job and stepping into more of the person who I wanted to become. And then how to encourage others to do that.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and it is really insightful as well. So I would definitely recommend it.
Nice, cool.
Yeah.
And then there's a few emails of like career reflection prompts to help you in your exploration of career change and stepping more into who you want to be and how you want your life to be designed.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, thank you.
If you found this conversation valuable, then it would be great if you could leave a review or share it with a friend so that more people can find this podcast. Thanks for listening.